In last video, we have seen the quantum numbers, that is principal quantum number, azimuthal quantum number, magnetic quantum number and spin quantum number. And you know that the magnetic quantum number gives idea about the various orbitals present in the subshell. So actually electrons revolve around the nucleus and in a specific orbit. In orbit there are subshells and in subshell there are orbitals. Now in this video we are going to discuss what are the different shapes of orbitals, various orbitals. So concept of orbitals. Now before that, what is orbital? The three-dimensional region around the nucleus where the probability of finding electron is maximum is called orbital. So orbital is actually three-dimensional region. It is around the nucleus where there is a maximum probability of finding electron. So commonly S, P, D and F orbitals are known, and they are frequently we are dealing with these orbitals. So we are going to discuss about shape of S, P and D orbitals. In addition to S, P, D, there is F orbital, G orbital, like that. But this video is restricted to the discussion related to the shape of S, P and D orbitals. Now first of all, S orbital. The S orbitals are spherically symmetrical about the nucleus. You can see this is the 1s orbital. Suppose this is x-axis, this is z-axis, and right angle to this axis there is a one more axis, that is the y-axis, and electronic cloud is spherically symmetrical. So this is 1s orbital. So here is the 1s orbital which is spherically symmetrical, and it is non-directional because the electronic cloud, it is oriented along the x, y and z axis, along all the directions. This is the 2s orbital. The size of 2s orbital is larger than 1s orbital. So the orbital highlighted with red color, it is the 2s orbital. And this is the 3s orbital. So in this way, size of s orbital increases from 1s to 2s to 3s to 4s. Now important thing again is s orbital present in all the shells, K, L, M, N, etc., or first shell, second shell, third shell, fourth shell, fifth shell and so on. S orbital present in all the shells. And size of s orbital, as I said, increases as the principal quantum number increases. Now most important thing is the region between every two adjacent orbitals where the probability of finding electron is 0, it is called as node. For example, in case of 2s orbital, there is one node. It is in between 1s orbital and 2s orbital. So this portion where there is a less probability of finding electron, this is called as node. In case of 3s orbital, there are two nodes. One node is in between 1s orbital and 2s orbital, and second node is between 2s orbital and 3s orbital. So this is the first node and this is the second node. Okay, and number of nodes, it is given by formula n minus L minus 1, where n is principal quantum number, L is azimuthal quantum number minus 1. As an example, you consider 3s orbital. For 3s orbital, principal quantum number is 3, azimuthal quantum number is 0. So 3 minus 0 minus 1, that is equal to 2. So for 3s orbital, there are two nodes. Now the shape of p orbitals. Actually, p orbital starts from second shell, and p orbitals consists of two lobes, and it has a dumbbell shape structure. It is a dumbbell shape and it is a directional because lobes are oriented along the x-axis, y-axis or z-axis. There are three p orbitals, px, py, pz, and these three p orbitals are said to be degenerate. It means in the absence of magnetic field they have equal energy. Now the shape of px orbital, again you consider x, y and z axis. In case of px orbital, the lobes are oriented along the x-axis. One lobe has positive sine wave function, other lobe has negative sine wave function. So this is px orbital. In case of py orbital, electronic cloud or lobes are oriented along the y-axis, and again one lobe has positive sine wave function, other has negative sine wave function. In case of pz orbital, electronic cloud is oriented along the z-axis and opposite lobes, that is two lobes have opposite sign of wave function, positive and negative. Now size of p orbital increases with increase in principal quantum number. Again p orbital starts from second shell, 1p is not possible, so 2p, 3p, 4p, size increases in this direction. Suppose this is the 2px orbital, this is positive, this is negative lobe. This is 3px orbital. 3px orbital has larger size than the 2px orbital, and this is the 4px orbital. In all the three cases, lobes are oriented along the x-axis, but size increases as the principal quantum number increases. Now the two lobes of p orbital are separated by nodal plane, and nodal plane, it is the region or plane where there is a less probability of finding electron. So this is the nodal plane. Nodal plane exists in p orbital and d orbital. So electronic cloud is oriented along this lobe, and therefore this p orbital is dumbbell shape, whereas along this plane there is a less probability of finding electron. This is called as nodal plane. Now the shape of d orbitals. Actually d orbitals are double dumbbell shape, and it's a three-dimensional. It has a directional character because there are four lobes and which are oriented either along the x, y and z axis or in between x, y and z axis, and d orbitals have directional character. There are 5 d orbitals. In the absence of magnetic field they have equal energy, and therefore it is said to be d orbitals are having 5-fold degenerate, or d orbitals are 5-fold degenerate. They have equal energy in the absence of magnetic field, and the d orbitals are dxy, dyz, dzx, dx square minus y square and dz square. These are the 5 d orbitals. Now first of all you consider the shape of dxy orbital. Consider x and y axis, and now consider the xy plane. This is the xy plane. In case of dxy orbital, lobes are oriented in between x and y axis, but the 4 lobes are oriented along the xy plane. These are the 2 lobes have same sine wave function, say for example negative, negative, and you can see lobes are oriented in between x and y axis. Another 2 lobes, they have opposite sine wave function, say for example positive, positive, and lobes are oriented in between x and y axis, but all the 4 lobes are oriented along the xy plane. Here z axis is right angle to this plane, and this is the structure of or geometry of dxy orbital. Now consider the shape of dyz orbital. Now consider z and y axis, these are right angle to each other. Here now you consider again yz plane. YZ, this is the YZ plane. Now these two lobes now oriented in between Y and Z axis. These negative lobes or lobes with negative sine wave function, these are oriented in between Y and Z axis. Similarly, these two lobes are oriented again in between Y and Z axis. So altogether 4 lobes are oriented in between Y and Z axis, but all the 4 lobes are oriented along the YZ plane. And here x axis is right angle to this plane, and this is the dyz orbital. Now consider the shape of dxz orbital. Again you consider x and z axis. This is the xz plane. Now these two lobes are oriented in between x and z axis. Remaining 2 lobes are also oriented in between x and z axis. So here lobes are oriented in between x and z axis but along the xz plane, and y axis is right angle to this plane, and this is the shape of the xz orbital. Now consider the shape of dx square minus y square. This is x axis and this is the y axis. This is the xy plane as we considered for dxy orbital. Now in case of dx square minus y square orbital, lobes are oriented along the axis. For example, the negative sine wave function lobes oriented suppose along the y axis, and remaining 2 lobes which have positive sine wave function, these are oriented along the x axis. Again these 4 lobes are oriented along the xy plane as well as along the axis x and y axis, and here z axis is right angle to this plane, and this is the dx square minus y square orbital. And then last orbital, that is dz square orbital. Again you consider x, y and z axis. Here 2 positive lobes oriented along the z axis, and these 2 negative lobes, they form ring. It has negative sine wave function, and here again lobes are oriented along the z axis, and therefore this is the dz square orbital. Now these 3 orbitals dxy, dyz, dzx or dxz, in case of these orbitals, lobes are oriented in between axes. These 3 orbitals are called as T2G orbitals. T stands for triply degenerate Girard orbitals. So in octahedral geometry or ligand field, these 5d orbitals split into 2 energy levels. At one energy level, these 3 orbitals exist, that is T2G orbitals. They have equal energy, and other energy level occupied by EG orbitals. So dx square minus y square and dz square orbitals, these are called as EG orbitals, doubly degenerate Girard orbitals. So this is about the shape of d orbitals. For d orbitals, always you keep in mind there are 5d orbitals. In the absence of magnetic field or any ligand field, their energy is equal, and in the presence of octahedral ligand field, orbitals split into 2 levels, EG level and T2G level. Okay, now, and what is the difference between dxy and dx square minus y square orbital? In case of dxy orbital, lobes are oriented in between axis x and y axis, but in case of dx square minus y square orbital, lobes are oriented along the x and y axis. This is most important thing.